welcome back again to our ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dhama. I'm happy to be with you again. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pashtacha Deshatarane. Perfect start. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today I would like to speak about a very special place situated on the far western corner of Vrindavan, between the areas of Nandera and Satavasa. And you will understand its special feature just by its name. In the old Vrindavan maps, it's called Nagala Sitaram. Nagala Sitaram. And in Sanskrit, Nagala refers to, quote, a small settlement of people, unquote. And this particular settlement came about as a result of a very unique pastime of Radha and Krsna that took place 5,000 years ago. When Radha and Krsna played, Kali means played, Kali pastimes, as Sita and Rama in the Vrindavan forest. Some old sadhus actually refer to that place as the Sita Ram garden. Or sometimes I was reading even as the Panchavati forest of Vrindavan. And as we all know, Lord Ramachandra and Sita Devi appeared millions of years ago in Treta Yuga. And through the ages, people in India listened to, and even today, discuss their exploits as described in the epic Ramayana, and often reenact their pastimes in drama and theater. I know in our Polish festival tour, the Ramayana theater is one of the most popular amongst our guests. In Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavat, we hear that Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, and their associates also reenacted Lord Ram's pastimes. So popular. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 15, verse 32, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he writes, Vijaya Dashami Lanka, Vijaya Yara Dhine, Vanara Shanya Kaila, Prabhu Lasa Bhakta Gane. Quote, on the day celebrating the conquest of Lanka, a day known as Vijaya Dashami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dressed up all his devotees as monkey soldiers. Unquote. There you go. And in Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adhikanda, Part 2, Text 45, we hear, Konadina Nityananda, Setu Bandakare, Vanera Rup Shaba, Shushu Ganadhare. Bengali. Quote, one day, Lord Nityananda enacted the pastime of building a bridge across the ocean with the boys playing the role of monkeys, unquote. Shastra also says that 5,000 years ago, such Ram Leela theatrical performances were also common. I found one very ancient shastras called the Vishnu Dharmotara, wherein it stated that Krishna himself reenacted the Ramayana with his cowherd friends. It's a particular shloka. It begins by stating, Krishna manifested all 24 principal forms of Vishnu at Apsara Kund in Vrindavan, just for the pleasure of the cowherd boys. Once he also manifested the form of 12-armed Govinda Dev, and one of the cowherd boys became Garuda. And then what is relevant to us today. And another time, Krishna manifested the form of Ram, and the cowherd boys became monkeys and bears. So even Krishna was reenacting his pastimes in ancient times as Ram. And actually, even as a small child, little Krishna was enamored by Ram Leela. That we know from Sri Rupa Goswami. There's a beautiful verse in his Padyavali, verse number 151, where we hear how Krishna was enamored by Ram Leela. Rupa Goswami writes as follows, quote, "One evening, as Yashoda Devi was putting him to sleep, Krishna asked, 'Mata, will you tell me an adventure story?' Mother Yasoda stroked her son's head and began. There was once a king named Ram. A smile appeared on Krishna's lips as he nodded and said, 'And then?' Mother Yasoda continued, 'He had a beautiful wife whose name was Sita.' Krishna's eyelids were getting heavy. Sleepily he said, 'And?' Gently stroking her son's face, Yashoda went on. On the order of his father, Ram went into exile with Sita and lived happily in the Panchavati forest until a demon called Ravana kidnapped Sita. Hearing the narration of his own pastimes from ancient times, Krishna startled his mother by suddenly sitting up from bed and calling out, 'Lakshman, Lakshman, where is my bow? Hurry, where is my bow? We must rescue her.' Krishna startled his mother. So my point was that even little Krishna was enamored by the pastimes of Ram. Now, as we mentioned earlier, in the Sita Ram garden in the Vrindavan forest, the gopis once asked Radha and Krishna to show themselves as Sita and Ram. And this pastime is actually very nicely recounted by my godbrother, His Holiness Sri Vrindavan Swami, in one of his publications. He writes that one time, as Radha and Krishna were strolling with the gopis through this charming part of the forest, one gopi spoke up and exclaimed that she felt the atmosphere was just like the forest of Panchavati, where Sita and Ram happily lived together in exile. She said, "This forest is blossoming with flowers, birds sing everywhere, the waterways are filled with pure nectar, and just see, wild animals move peacefully amongst each other, just like in Panchavati forest." Just like the Panchavati forest. So at one point, another girl, with a gopi, pointed out a small grove that she said resembled a sadhu's bhajan kutir near a small hill, that the grove resembled a sadhu's bhajan kutir. So another gopi said, "Yes, it looks just like the cottage that Lakshman built for Sita and Ram. Let's go inside." So they went inside this little grove which resembled this cottage that Lakshman built for Sita and Ram, and went inside. The gopis asked Radha and Krishna if they could decorate them like Sita and Ram, because everything appeared very much like that particular forest and the cottage, and as described in Ramayana. So the divine couple, they, in a playful mood, they agreed. So the gopis sat them down on a flower couch, and they dressed them in very simple outfits, like the clothes that ascetics would wear. And then they tied Krishna's hair into a top knot, just like a sage. And then after making flower ornaments, the gopis brought all these flower ornaments to Radha and Krishna. And smiling, they said, it's very interesting, they smiled and they said, quote, "Sita and Ram had no maidservants. They ornamented each other. So we think you should do the same." So as Radha and Krishna faced each other, the gopis handed them these flower ornaments, one after another. while the divine couple took pleasure in their artistic skills of ornamenting each other. Now, as they did this, ornamenting each other with these beautiful flower ornaments, as Sita and Ram, the gopis began singing songs glorifying Sita and Ram's, you could say, happier pastimes in the forest of Panchavati. Now, the interesting thing is that when Radha and Krishna heard the singing of the gopis, describing the transcendental pastimes of Sita and Ram, they forgot they were play acting by the potency of Yogamaya. They forgot they were play acting. And suddenly, they thought of themselves as actually being Sita Devi and Lord Ramachandra. And seeing the divine couple transformed in this way, the gopis, they place a large bow and a quiver of arrows made from flowers beside Krishna. And as the gopis kept singing the pastimes of Sita and Ram from the Ramayana, Radha and Krishna became more and more absorbed in these previous pastimes in the Panchavati forest. And then, to the amazement of all the gopis, suddenly Krishna's cloud blue complexion is described. His cloud blue complexion turned grass green, like Ram. And mesmerized by seeing the divine couple in, this bhav of Ram Leela, the gopis continued singing verses from the Ramayana. Specifically, they sang from the Aranya Kanda section of the Ramayana. I think it was chapters 12 to 15. And in this particular part of the Ramayana, they were singing how Sita, Ram, and Lakshman once visited the sage Agastya Muni in his ashram. And therein it's described how at one point Agastya Muni brought a number of weapons forward and was giving them to Ramchandra. It's described that these weapons, they blazed with divine splendor. And one gopi closed her eyes as she sang from Ramayana in Agastya Muni's voice. Quote, she's singing, "Here is Vishnu's bow, made by Vishwakarma, studded with gold and diamonds. Here is Brahma's arrow, which never misses its mark. And here are Shiva's two inexhaustible quivers. And here is Lord Vishnu's sword." Agastya Muni's offering these things to Ram. "Please accept these weapons," she's singing in the voice of Agastya Muni, "in your fight against evil. Employ them as Indra uses his thunderbolts." So then another gopi, this time with tears in her eyes, sang how Agastya Muni expressed such deep affection for Ram and Lakshman. "O Ram, O Lakshman," she sang as Agastya Muni, "you have taken so much trouble to visit me. I see that you are perspiring, and the daughter of Janaka, being young and unaccustomed to the trials of jungle life, is clearly tired. Some distance from here is the beautiful forest of Panchavati, full of roots, fruits, water, and abundant with deer. Build your cottage there and live peacefully." So this is putting Radha and Krishna more and more in the mood of Sita and Ram. And then finally, it's so nice, finally all the gopis, they sang together. After leaving Agastya Muni's ashram, Ram wandered the forest and selected a beautiful level place, surrounded by flowering trees, not far from the Godavari river. There he requested Lakshman to build a cottage. So there's more. Time is of essence. They go on for quite a long time, actually. And after hearing the Ramayana, in the sweet singing of the gopis, Radha and Krishna were now more in the mood of Sita and Ram than ever. So at one point in this divine trance organized by Purnamasi, Krishna took Radha's hand and they walked out of that, quote unquote, that cottage and began to stroll through the forest again. And there Krishna, in the mood of Ram, pointed out to Radha, who was in the mood of Sita, the beauty of the Panchavati forest. And there's some beautiful description of the Panchavati forest. And as the gopis followed Radha and Krishna, they were amazed that just as Radha and Krishna had transformed into Sita and Ram, even in their appearance, Vrindavan appeared to have become the Panchavati forest. Everything is there to facilitate these pastimes. So Vrindavan forest looked like Panchavati forest. And of course, again, this was all Keli Leela, this was all playful pastimes, planned and organized by Purnamasi, Yogamaya. So after some time, by Yogamaya's arrangement, Radha and Krishna's Ram Leela trance was broken. And it's also described, the Panchavati forest took back the sweet mood of the Vrindavan forest. And it's said that because the gopis rarely saw the divine couple so absorbed in an identity other than their own, as Radha and Krishna, as these gopis all headed home, they were all silent, being absorbed in the wonderful memory of the glorious pastimes of Sita and Ram in the beautiful Panchavati forest. And it's stated that some days later, as the gopis were, discussing what they'd seen and heard in this particular pastime, they concluded amongst themselves at the place where Radha and Krishna became Sita and Ram was actually the Panchavati forest. And so the place where the divine couple had, decorated each other, heard the Ramayana, that place became known as Nagala Sitaram. You can visit there. Nagala Sitaram. It's described a place devotees may visit to, quote, deeply enter into the pastimes of Krishna as he was in Treta Yuga as Lord Ramachandra. Isn't that a wonderful pastime? We have to go there to that Nagala Sitaram, or that Sitaram garden in the Panchavati forest. Now, I was reading that just south of Nagala Sitaram, there's a garden. Actually, every step in Vrindavan, there's something amazing that's happened. So just south of this Sitaram garden, there's another garden called Vanacariya. Vanacariya, where once, in Krishna's absence, the cowherd boys discussed whether Krishna was a cowherd boy or a forest dweller. There's a difference. They were discussing, is Krishna a cowherd boy, or is he a dweller of the forest, a forest dweller? Now Krishna and the cowherd boys had brought their cows to this particular place one day, Vanacariya, specifically because of the sweet grass that grows there. We know the boys like to do the best for their cows, so they take them to where, the grasses in particular are particularly sweet. So on this particular day, at one point, Krishna left the cows and the boys, along with Madhu Mangal, on the plea of, quote, seeing the rest of the forest. Krishna wanted to see the rest of the forest. It's described a plea that some of the gopas knew to simply be an excuse to meet some gopis. There's different types of cowherd boys, and some are quite close to Krishna, so they know of his amorous pastimes with the gopis, and as we've discussed on many of occasions, they facilitate that meeting. These are special friends of Krishna. So while Krishna was away, seeing the forest with Madhu Mangal, a big group of the boys, cowherd boys, they gathered together, and while resting comfortably under a banyan tree, began talking about their favorite subjects. What's their favorite subject? Krishna, no doubt. And in the course of the conversation, one boy, he asked, now half jokingly, he asked, "My dear friends, I have a doubt. The duty of our caste is to protect cows. For this we are known as gopas. Is Krishna also a gopa like us? Or is he a forest dweller who happens to take care of cows as well? I'm not sure." This is how he brought up the subject matter. So another boy said, "What makes you think that Gopal, with whom we herd cows every day, could be anything other than a gopa?" "Dear friends," the first boy replied, "consider this. We live in villages where we house our cows, tend our gardens and orchards, and come to the pastures during the day. Then we go home. But you see, Krishna's life is a little different. Yes, he comes cowherding with us every morning. Then during the day, just like now, he goes off to see the beauty of the forest, which we know includes seeing the beauty of our sisters, the beauty of our sisters, who are always loitering somewhere nearby to catch his attention. And what does Krishna do with our sisters? He wears garlands of forest flowers, strolls with them in the forest beside the Jamuna, and rests with them in the forest groves on flower cots. Finally, when Krishna returns to us, my friends, what does he look like?" And the other boys, they blurted out, "A forest dweller." A forest dweller. So the first boy said, "Exactly, that's my point. He's covered head to toe in flowers, flower decorations, and more, and he's usually dressed in new clothes from one of Vrindadevi's storehouses." I thought that was really cute. He's usually dressed in new clothes from one of Vrindadevi's storehouses. So not only does he prefer to look like a forest dweller, his wardrobe is also in the forest, in Vrindadevi's storehouse. But Krishna doesn't live in the forest, another boy interrupted. He lives in Nandagram. Taking the side of Krishna being a cowherd, not a forest dweller. Krishna doesn't live in the forest, that boy said. He lives in Nandagram. So the first boy who started this whole conversation, he says, "For some time, yes, but not long enough for one to call it his home." So then all the boys, they said, "What do you mean?" So that first boy, he continued, he said, "Dear friends, just consider Krishna's daily schedule. He returns to Nandagram with us, yes, milks the cows, he bathes, he enjoys his supper and evening entertainment, and then he goes to sleep. Like all of us, we go to sleep for the whole night. But then what does Krishna do? He wakes up, climbs out of his window, and runs off again to the Vrindavan forest for practically the whole night. And only in the wee hours of the morning does he return, pretending that he's been sleeping in his bed all night long. We know this. So my point is, does Krishna really reside in Nandagram? No. He spends his days and nights in the forest and only comes home to bathe, to have a couple cooked meals, and to collect and drop off his father's cows. Krishna uses Nandagram like an actor uses a dressing room. Krishna lives in the forest. He just visits his family and kinsmen. That's why I say he's actually a forest dweller that happens to take care of cows. Gopal's not a gopa like us who lives in villages and herds cows in the forest and comes home to sleep at night. This is my conclusion. So the cowherd boys, they went silent for a moment, meditating, on their friends' words. A couple boys had spoken, proposing different views. And then they started arguing amongst themselves, taking sides. Some saying, Krishna, he's a cowherd. Others insisting, no, he's a forest dweller, back and forth. And it's described, just as things looked as if they might get out of hand, the sound of a flute wavered through the air. The sound of a flute wavered through the air, through the Vrindavan forest, announcing that Krishna was arriving. So all of a sudden, the boys became dead silent. And then Krishna arrived on the scene. And as he looked around, he became a little suspicious. He could pick up on the mood. And he asked, my dear friends, exactly what is it that you were all talking about? And the boys remained silent and slightly embarrassed, it said, until one boy, he blurted out, what were we talking about? You! I thought that was sweet. One boy blurted out, what were we talking about? You! Then all the other boys, they raced to surround Krishna and began calling out in unison, Krishna, what were we discussing? You, you, you. You, you, you. You, you, you. Which is true. But Krishna was still a little suspicious until all the boys came forward. And one by one, with deep, loving affection, they embraced him. One by one. They embraced him. Krishna, next boy, Krishna, it was you, it was you, it was you. How could it be anything other than Krishna? So finally, Krishna became pacified, no longer suspicious, and he smiled. All right. And as for their heated discussions as to whether Krishna was, a gopa or a forest dweller, that all just evaporated into the air. Ultimately, whatever Krishna was or is, he's the only beloved of the cowherd boys' hearts. Their love for him is so intense, so unconditional, that it said it can accommodate his being as a cowherd boy, a forest dweller, or on some occasions, even as God. Sometimes the cowherd boys, they realize Krishna's God. Oh, that's cool. But what's really important, that he's their friend, Sakiras. He's their friend. So that's how it all happened. It kind of evaporated, this discussion. Is he a gopa or a forest dweller? It doesn't really make any difference. For all of them, he's the love of their life. Whether he's a cowherd boy, a forest dweller, or even God, it said. So Raghunath Das Goswami, he nicely glorifies and worships these cowherd boys, these friends of Krishna, famously in his Brajavilashtava, text 42, a nice conclusion to this pastime, Raghunath Das Goswami writes, affectionately protected by Krishna and their hearts wrapped in meditation on the particles of dust falling from the tip of his handsome lotus toenails, the gopas experience a happiness greater than the happiness of many millions of universes. I worship these exalted gopas. Raghunath Das Goswami. Let's recite that again. Affectionately protected by Krishna and their hearts wrapped in meditation on the particles of dust falling from the tip of his handsome lotus toenails, the gopas experience a happiness greater than the happiness of many millions of universes. I worship these exalted gopas. They're wrapped in meditation just on the particles of dust falling from the tip of his handsome lotus toenails. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Raghunath Das Goswami. So we'll move on. There's a lot of nectar in Vrindavan. Our home, our original home, to where we aspire to go and live forever. Krishna says again in Bhagavad Gita, having once returned there, one never comes back to this material world. What better goal could one have in life? What more would one want to achieve in this life? But we have to keep our mind fixed on the goal, because there's a lot of ways we can be diverted. Maya Devi, she's very powerful. But Krishna's more powerful. And let us remember, we can always remain connected to Krishna. So the simple process introduced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So now, further south, according to the map, from Vanacariya, is a beautiful grove named Parehi. And there's a very sweet pastime that took place in this Parehi, where Krishna once told the gopis that he was fed up with their teasing him. He was fed up with their teasing him. From many of the pastimes this last year, we know sometimes the gopis, they tease Krishna. These Brajavasi gopis are quite strong personalities. Even today, I see in Vrindavan, the girls are quite strong. So they were fed up with, Krishna was fed up with their teasing him. So one day, the gopis and Krishna had agreed to meet at Parehi. And upon Krishna's arrival, or preparing for Krishna's arrival, it's described the gopis had made everything very nice with floral decorations, aromatic incense. They had prepared a nice sitting place for Krishna, and they prepared all types of nectarian fruit juices. It was a very nice mood. Krishna's coming, Radha's going to meet Krishna here, so let's arrange everything very nicely. Decorations, incense, a soft sitting place, fruit juices. But on his way to this particular rendezvous, through the forest, Krishna was thinking of ways to increase the gopis' love for him. On the way, he's thinking, how can I get them to love me more? So he came up with a really interesting plan. And what was that? Well, upon arriving at this particular spot, the rendezvous, he began by ignoring the girls' greetings. They had some very, very cheerfully greeted him. He ignored that. So needless to say, the gopis were confused. And next, Krishna didn't accept their invitation to even enter this particular grove. Instead, he stood outside the entrance and said, it's quite famous what he said. He said, "Young ladies, listen to me. When I arrived here, I could tell from the smiles on your faces that you plan to, yet again, ridicule me, or perhaps set me up for one of your tired village jokes. But I won't have any more of that behavior." This is all part of his plan, to get them to love him more. Hearing these words, the gopis stood stunned and speechless. So Krishna continued, "You may play innocent now," he said. "But how can that be? Time and time again, you all steal my flute and hide it in your braids, or accuse me of being dull-witted for spending too much time with the cows. You may appear to welcome me now, but where is that hospitality when I have walked through a thorn-filled jungle in the dead of night, and after my long sacrifice, you turn me away at the door to some grove? You just turn me away, like you're not interested. And this silence, where is your silence when, after dressing and ornamenting yourselves in ways that make the demigods fall from the sky, I express some appreciation for your beauty, only to be called a fool? Some may think you are kind, but that kindness is a joke. You challenge me, a prince who is duty-bound to accept any challenge, to a game of dice, and then gang up on me and call me a cheat when you lose. You call the prince a cheat when you lose? I can see my words have had a sobering effect on you. But how sober can you be when you forest maids tempt me with honey wine, so that you can later accuse me of being a drunkard? So these are strong words. This is all part of Krishna's plan. So though it's described, although reeling from Krishna's words, some gopis wanted to speak up, but Krishna said, before you say anything, girls, listen to this. If you play any more of your tricks, if you belittle me in any way, then what? Then you won't see me anymore. Is that clear? Then you won't see me anymore. Is that clear? Now, with that, Krishna stopped speaking and he stared at the gopis. And Shastra says that with the words, "You won't see me," when Krishna said, "You won't see me," the whole forest became deathly quiet. And even then, the more contrary gopis, who were about to argue with Krishna, they held their breath. And the acharyas say, what did Krishna mean? You won't see me anymore? The acharyas reply, the gopis did not want to know. What did it mean? You won't see me anymore. They didn't even want to contemplate that. The acharyas say, quote, such a threat was not to be questioned and certainly not challenged, unquote. Such a threat was not to be questioned and certainly not challenged. So after several long moments, the wind moved the leaves of the trees, breaking the silence. And then it's written that birds chirped, streams bubbled, and the other forest sounds resumed as soft background music to the gopis' unified voice. With that background music of the forest, the gopis said in a unified voice, Sham Sundar, it will always be as you wish. Wow. Yeah. Sham Sundar, it will always be as you wish. This is the heart of the Brajbasis. This was Krishna's plan. He's spoken that way to get them to love him more. And that's certainly apparent when he said, that you won't see me anymore. If you continue like this, you won't see me anymore. Gopis didn't want to have anything to do with that statement. Such a threat was not to be questioned and certainly not challenged. So they said famously, Sham Sundar, it will always be as you wish. This is the surrendered mood of the gopis. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord. He shall always remain such, even if he handles me roughly or makes me broken-hearted by not embracing me. He will always be my worshipable Lord unconditionally. This is from the mouth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shikshastakam prayers. We can see this mood of the gopis, and here we see it again. Sham Sundar, it will always be as you wish. So pleased by the gopis' submissive attitude, Krishna entered the grove, and there the gopis, it's described, waited on him, hand and foot, as maidservants would wait on a king. Now, because Krishna had threatened the gopis that if they joked with him or made fun of him again, they would not see him afterwards. Pare, afterwards. As we say in Sanskrit, pare. The gopis called this grove Parehi. Parehi, they called that because, because Krishna had threatened the gopis, and if they joked with him again, he would not see them afterwards, pare, any time afterwards, pare. The gopis always refer to that grove as parehi. Interesting note, although it's a very beautiful place, the gopis never returned to Parehi again. They never went back there. They never returned to Parehi again. And local custom is that once a pilgrim visits Parehi, they never return as well. So dear Prabhus, when we go on our Kartik Parikrama, that we always talk about, we will go there one time, and in the mood of the gopis, we will never return. Hare Krishna. So much nectar today. So as we've mentioned many times, these pastimes we're discussing, this is the highest absolute truth. Vrindavan's never attained, even by the greatest yogis, the greatest mystics, the greatest scholars, ascetics. Even for bhaktas, devotees of the Lord, it's rare to attain pure devotion and be qualified to go back home, back to Godhead. But it's something that's been introduced to us by Srila Prabhupada and our previous acharyas for the express purpose of going there one day. Otherwise, what is the meaning of the Sankirtan movement? If it's not meant to deliver anything mundane and material, it's not meant to just liberate us from the repetition of birth and death. It's not even meant to take us to Vaikuntha. The Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is meant to take us to the topmost planet in the spiritual sky, Goloka Vrindavan. It's possible. And we can hope and pray very intensely like that. Unless you want a great goal, a very high goal, unless you want it very intensely, chances are you won't make it. Like when you go to college, university, you've chosen some particular subject, doctor, a lawyer, let us say, for example. It's a high goal, to be very determined. In medical school, a lot of students drop out. In law school, a lot drop out. The Bible says many are called, but few are chosen. So we have to be very determined to go back home. We can't spend time just, procrastinating. Yes, I'm a little older, I'll be more serious. For now, I have this, I have that. We have to constantly have this elolium, this greed for braj, for service to the divine couple in Vrindavan. So we have to hope against hope, like we talked about in another lecture, that we'll make it. And interestingly enough, this feeling of disqualification that we have, that can be an incentive. Feeling oneself unqualified, it can be an incentive because that makes us fully dependent on Krishna's mercy. We try our best, but we know that it's only with Krishna's mercy. Therefore, when we chant from the heart. My dear Lord, my dear energy of the Lord, Srimati Radharani, please, 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 pick me up from this ocean of death. Fix me as an atom at your lotus feet. Take me home to Braj. That's where I want to be. So this attitude of, you could say, extreme humility. I'm not qualified. I depend on your mercy. This attitude of extreme humility is nicely described in a beautiful poem by a medieval poet named Vaishnava Das. And I would like to finish today with his poem, because this feeling inadequate brings about a mood of humility, and therefore a full dependence on the mercy of the Lord. It's a good combination. It's a good combination. So this is a beautiful prayer by this great Vaishnava, medieval poet, Vaishnava Das. He entitles his poem, The Dreams of a Pauper. Pauper means a poor man. He called it The Dreams of a Pauper. And this is his poem. Hari, Hari, what nonsense do you say? On one hand is Krishna Prema, the essence of all good fortune, and on the other hand is the useless waste of a person like me. Oh, my mad mind, how can these two ever come together? There is a place in the spiritual world called Vrindavan, which is the essence of unlimited Vaikuntha planets. In that Vrindavan stays the complete manifestation of Godhead, named Krishna Chandra, along with the greatest of his lovers, named Shri Radhika Thakurani. Both of them enjoy pastimes along with their Sakis. To be engaged in arranging for such loving pastimes in the association of the Sakis is not possible even for Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Shesh. How then can a wretched person as myself, who is the personified abode of all sins, ever think to attain such a position? A dwarf may touch the moon. A lame person may cross the ocean. A mute person may recite the Vedas. The sun may even rise in the west. Camphor may start giving off a bad odor, and stones lying on the street may one day turn into touchstones. All these things may happen one day, but I will never be able to receive the darshan of Sri Radha Madhava. Vaishnav Das thinks that his hopes are as useless as those of a poor man who has taken intoxication. Such a poor person can only dream of such things while lying down semi-conscious. There's extreme humility. So such humility is helpful on the path back home to our beloved Vrindavan Dham. And when Krishna sees this combination of extreme humility plus an intense desire to achieve Goloka, no doubt he makes arrangements to bring that devotee home. And I would like to finish with a verse from our beloved Sri Rupa Goswami that puts that into proper perspective. That Krishna will make an arrangement for such a sincere devotee to make it back home. And again, I quote from Padyavali. This is verse 102, and again I conclude. A dark-complexioned thief has stolen my heart. Look, he has already stolen the sins of surrendered devotees, the life breath of Putana, the bracelets and garments of the young gopis, and the eyes and hearts of the saintly devotees. Once more. A dark-complexioned thief has stolen my heart. Look, he has already stolen the sins of surrendered devotees, the life breath of Putana, the bracelets and garments of the young gopis, and the eyes and hearts of the saintly devotees. We can make it with Krishna's mercy. We just have to be humble and serve Prabhupada to the best of our ability. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Prabhu, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this, our travels today through the Vrindavan forest. And with great pleasure, with the greatest pleasure, I will return in a couple of days and share with you more of the unlimited glories of our most beloved Sri Vrindavan Dhama, the very goal of our lives. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavan Eshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Goloka Vrindavan Dhama ki, Gauda Premanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe, Shyam Shyam Shyam. All glories to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.